my conception of postmodernism.
Okay.
Right? I've conceived. I mean, it's my first, and up until I came across your essay and subsequent essays about postmodernism, I conceived it. I conceived it from a very the postmodern in the West.
Okay.
The postmodern movement within the West. So that was my initial concern.
Okay.
Like the exhibition of postmodernism across the West.
Okay.
So now coming to see it here, it's like, well, you have on the other hand this postmodernism that you speak of that sort of tries to
break the bound,
and wrestle this modernity and the claim of what is modern for the African.
Yes.
On the other hand, you have this sort of postmodern that is very critical of the West, and it sort of tries to tear it down in this zero-sum way in order to prove that it is all a farce.
Oh yes, yeah.
So what do you think of this sort of mesh of them? Gradually, I mean, because I sort of see this. I'm beginning to see it exhibit itself in like movements that we see today in like feminism or any of these contemporary movements. A sort of snowball. I call it it's snowballing.
Okay.
Because these two things that just happen to find each other.
Yeah.
These two different postmodernisms.
Yes. So that essay you referenced, we are all postmodernists now. One of the major things I attempted to do there is to see, in all these different manifestations of postmodernism, what can we call the postmodern minima? In other words, that minimum condition for something to be called postmodern or postmodernism. And how did I arrive at that strategy? I decided to take two postmodern thinkers. Take Foucault, for instance, and take Derrida. What were their strategies? For Foucault went into social history. How did we arrive at our understanding of madness? How did we construct the first prison? And you begin to see how, through critical analysis, he was able to go deep into the art of, an attempt to protect the social. So anybody who is deviant, anybody who is eccentric, those are the people we call mad. And then we build the panopticon, we build the all those big, and then we just put them, together, and then we consider them mad. Look at Derrida. The construction method is to look at texts and to undermine those texts, not by reference to any external factor, but by reference to elements, textual elements within the very text itself. So by looking at all those ones, I began to see that, yes, postmodern strategy is an attempt to look at concepts and issues, and use them to bring down the claims that those concepts that are integral to those concepts themselves. So it is in that essay that I say, if we can all agree that this is the postmodern minima, then do we also agree that this minima is what we want within, what we can deploy within the African philosophy debate? Especially the debate against Eurocentrism, against the conception of a universal rationality that would not include the Africans. So you begin to say, postmodernism here, feminism there, and so on and so forth, but what is central to all of them? And how can we begin to use that central one? Yes, it's definitely not everybody that will agree with me that is what the postmodern minima is, but that is what I consider it to be, and I consider that if we agree on that, then it's something that can work within African philosophy. So that was my starting point. I don't know now whether I am still. I don't think postmodernism is something that I can abandon, in spite of what Abiola Irele and the rest of them have said. But I'm looking forward to a day that I'm also going to put a book together, maybe a sympathetic one. There is one, forgotten the name of the author now, it is Postmodernism and African Studies. And you have people from various disciplines, African studies, philosophy, and so on, who we're engaging with. And the look through the entire book, you will not find anything, I don't think you'll find anything sympathetic, you know, or an attempt to grapple with what is the essence of postmodernism and how can we begin to deploy it, you know. So that is where my research focus is now. I need to go back. It just occurred to me now that the question you raised earlier about an attempt to bring the African past and the African present together. Again, part of that postmodern minima. Postmodernism, if you look at it as a period term, is an attempt to disengage. In fact, the term is to rupture the past and your relationship with it. I don't think that's something that can be done. There's no way, even at the level of the individual, there is no way you can rupture the past and then want to move on. But that is one of the fundamental essences of postmodernism, that everything called the past is the past. Let it go. Then you can start on a clean state. So the question now is, take Africa as a context. Is there a way we can start from a scratch? Now, that question is problematic because Africa does not have a past. The concept of Africa itself came as a result of colonialism, okay? The pre-colonial African past is the past of several ethnic. But part of what we call Africa now is a convergence of values, a convergence of cultural similarities, and so on.
Forwarded by colonialism.
What?
The values.
Yeah. Those values that, those societies and communities that we now call Africans have and they share in common. Values of communalism, for instance. Values of social reciprocity, that will enable me to help my brother and my sisters when they are in need and not just turn my back on them because we now live in an atomistic society, okay? So those are values that scholars, African sociologists and the rest of them, people like Akinshola Akiwowo, that's a brilliant guy who attempted to deploy verses of the Ifa corpus as a basis of looking at, the way we relate in modern society. Okay, so there is no way you can then say that Africa should start from the scratch as a postmodern continent, because our position in that postmodern continent is already undermined by slavery, by colonialism, already critically undermined. And so once you say, forget your past and then begin to relate the way you are, then we are going to be subject to a whole lot of terrible thing that neoliberal hegemony is making possible today.
So sort of talking about that then, I guess I don't want to dismiss Irene.
Okay.
And I really,
okay.
Because I really am a big fan of him. So
okay.
Just from one essay, I just enjoyed that essay
thoroughly.
Okay. And the point he makes, and don't you think there is a very, very strong argument to be made? Because what he's saying is perhaps that, understandably, postmodernism is beautiful to think about and talk about.
Yes.
And imagine how we would love for an Africa to be that we could use, that would sort of grapple with the modernity and sort of recreate that.
Yeah.
But in practice, we have the worst rates of poverty in the world.
Yes.
We are lagging behind in providing energy, clean water, and the basic amenities.
The whole gamut of developmental and other developmental issues.
Everywhere, the worst of it, you have Africa. You have pointed to Africa.
Yes.
Now, so isn't it sort of useless and sort of incoherent for us as Africans
to begin to talk of
philosophers to waste our time with issues like postmodernism?
No, I don't think so. Again, let's go back. I mean, philosophers are in love with conceptual analysis, conceptual clarification. Essentially because there's no way you can move forward if both of us are arguing at cross purposes. In other words, this is what you meant by postmodernism. This is what I'm talking about. We will just continue arguing from now till tomorrow, and we will not arrive at a particular point. So the question goes back to, what idea of postmodernism or post-structuralism is Abiola really working with? Which, those of us who want to recuperate the postmodern agenda for African philosophy, which idea are we working with? So, if your idea of postmodernism is this understanding of it as a playful narration, that seeks to undermine all certainties, epistemological certainties and so on, just for the sake of it, then I agree with you. In other words, we are not at a stage in Africa's post-colonial predicament that we can begin to use terms in playful manner. Good. But if postmodernism is an attempt for the subaltern, those who have been oppressed, those who have been under the yoke, whatever kind of yoke you want to conceive of it, to burst their yoke and find a voice for themselves, then you begin to see that I am coming to postmodernism from a different perspective. So, in the first place, for Africa to move forward, we need to settle the issue of agency. Do we have a voice? It is this Indian, one of the greatest post-colonial scholars, Gayatri Spivak. I don't know whether you've heard, that posed that question. Can the subaltern speak? So the same can be posed about the African continent. Can Africa speak in the world, the global, affairs scheme of things? Do we have a voice? Do we have a voice precisely because of all those issues that you have raised? In statistics, we are the worst. The worst place to be, the worst continent to be born, the most corrupt continent in the world, and so on. So in terms of statistics, do we have that voice? Okay? But all those are not even the issue. In terms of scholarship, do we have a voice? Have we gotten to that level where we can begin to say, yeah, this is the path that we want to take? China is taking the Beijing consensus now, that path. The West has given Africa the Washington consensus. So part of finding our voice is trying to look for something that is homegrown, something that is indigenous. Now, this is where I'm coming, and this is where the issue of Abiola Relay and postmodernism is a no-go for me. Now, if you agree that for any continent, for any people to develop, they need to look inward, and if you agree that there is something inward for us to look at, then it becomes clear to you that we need a voice to be able to look inward, the old kind of argument that Sheikh Anta Diop and the rest of them have been following. To be able to look inward into our past, even though the past is not there, okay? And to see what is it about development that we can bring about. If you go to South Africa now, there's this whole issue of indigenous knowledge system that is coming up. In other words, people are now going into all those local cultures. When you have an accident and your bone is broken, how were they able to deal with it then, outside of surgery? When you want to put, the issue of iron and all those things together, metallurgy, what was metallurgy like in the pre-colonial period? When you are talking of health or social order, what was it that the Yoruba people were doing in those times before the colonialists came? When you are talking of, marriage and religion and spirituality, what was it then, and so on. And there's a whole lot of focus on indigenous knowledge system now, as a way of reinventing our tired civilization. Civilization is already becoming tired. And the way forward now, which is the advantage for the African continent, is for us to now, okay, what is it that we can now offer in terms of, modernity? So that takes us back to saying we are not modern yet. We're still struggling with it. And we are struggling because we have this old baggage of modern ideas that the West wants us to have. But how can we say, okay, hold on a bit. Okay, yes, we know this is there. But how come, if for instance, we bring this along, how can we put it together in shape, in form of something that will be uniquely ours? Again, all within the context of multilateral modernity. That yes, this is your own form of, this is the modern idea, but this is the way we are relating to that modern idea. So the modern idea within the African context will be different from what India as a subcontinent considers to be a modern idea. Okay? In Japan, in Asian societies now, you see that subtle, coherent relationship between modernity and religiosity and spirituality. Yeah. So in a very big company like that, you can have a small shrine to Shintoism there. Confucianism is invading the way the Chinese are thinking about their existence, and yet Confucius died many, many, many years ago. Do you begin to?
I understand that.
So it goes down to what was it that the Relay was talking about when he was rejecting postmodernism, and I think I have an idea of it. You know, it is, the West has arrived at economic affluence, and they can afford to now begin to generate ideas, that. So somebody like a Relay will cite, the attempt by the postmodernists to undermine Marxism. Okay? The attempt by people like Akili Mbembe to undermine the concept, a solid, ontologically solid concept of Africa, and rather see it as text, a place of going and coming, a place of becoming and so on, okay? But from where I'm coming from, I can invert that same postmodern idea to say that no, Marxism is something that is significant, even though it is a meta-narrative, but it is significant for Africa, and we can still deploy it as a strategy, a revolutionary strategy that will allow Africa to come to terms with itself, rather than coming to terms with what others think about us. So it bothers me that a concept that is so fluid, that is so multidimensional, we can just take it as one and then we just reject it. No, I don't think that is something that a scholar can do, and not a philosopher, for instance. A philosopher will have to look at the intricacies of a particular concept, break it down, and then put it together and see how you can then begin to use it. Or even use it in a form that those who deploy the concept in the first place were not even thinking about. And I think that is my whole project with postmodern concept.
This sort of is the last question, and just to round up in general. And it's directly related to, how do I phrase this? To sort of the question of the universal. And we've sort of touched on this, but is sort of different. It's sort of like this question of the universalizing tendency of the Western principles, and how sort of how we sort of talk about like why we shouldn't, but how can we, if Africans, if we're trying to reclaim or do anything, sort of hold on, sort of prevent this sort of interaction whereby, because what's happening is, you see globalization is happening, and all globalization is happening, whatever it is, it's sort of eroding different aspects of African culture we consider dear. Now, what determines, this is two questions, what determines what we should hold dear? Like in this constant modernization that is happening, regardless of what we are thinking about, in this constant modernization is happening, what determines what we should hold there? Let me give you this example that I always try to, always is my puzzle. It's like, on one hand, we're like, female genital mutilation, we should stop. On the other hand, still the same Africans are like, LGBTQ rights, we're like, no. But from the same people, are the same people who basically showed us the faults of, I mean, on a large scale, not realize it, but basically, are same people who basically said, you people should stop these things are barbaric. For your culture, stop. So, what determines what we should hold there? If that makes sense.
It does.
Which one? It does. Like, how do we differentiate between, they want to erode bride, this thing, what they call it, bride price.
Bride price.
Okay, let's go with that, or let's not go with that. What's the determining factor between all these different things that we should say? Okay, like
well, what is it? What is it? Yeah.
Is there something that we can say? Or is there a framework we can put everything?
Yeah. So let's start with a question. What makes us flourish as a people? That can be a starting question for us. Like, okay, we are a people, but what are those values? What are those principles that enables us to flourish? If we can answer that question appropriately, then we can now begin to see, because the question you asked is a very, very serious one. It is serious because you have the concept of tradition, and the concept of tradition has the capacity to accommodate both the negative and the positive in human practice. So I have some pictures on my phone of scarification, you know, of a baby having all those scary marks, you know, tribal marks on the face, you know. You've talked of female genital mutilation. But people still do it, or do those things. Those practices are still enduring because people simply say these are the part of the tradition, okay? But on the other hand, you also have good values, positive values that people can hold on to, that enables them, that has enabled them over time to continue to move forward, that has enabled them over time to keep faith, you know, with the kind of people they are and where they intend to go in the future. Okay, so it is at that point that we can now situate that question. As a people, how do we move forward? And what are those things that has enabled us to move forward in the past? Putting that question that way is tricky because, of course, you can have things that are negative, but that also enable you to move forward. Okay, because you've just decided that you're not going to question it. Okay, but because we are living in a modern time now, and we've come to the experience of, okay, all these things that we call modern, you know, most of them are getting exhausted. Okay, I mean, look at the experience of medicine and of science, okay, and the things. So people are now, there's a kind of how do I want to put it now? Some sort of attempt to look at alternatives, you know, as a way of just going forward, rather than just moving with, you know, modern inventions and so on. So a people will be forced to look inward into themselves to see what are those values. Take the Yoruba value of Omoluabi. Take the Southern African value that people bandy about now of Ubuntu, of collectiveness, of collectivity, of how, you know, people look at one another rather than as a collective, rather than as individuals. So you take that, and you need to know what people have done with the Ubuntu term now, vis-a-vis Omoluabi. You know, so people have applied Ubuntu to issue of management science. They've applied Ubuntu to the family institution. They've applied it even to the state and the way the governed, or the government can begin to relate with the governed. Okay, so it is at that point of what are our values? Number one. Number two, how should we relate to our value? Now that second question is significant. In fact, that is the point of people like Kwasi Wiredu, looking at the values of the Akan society, looking at the values of the Yoruba society, and seeing how we can critically relate with those values. So it is not just about what are those values that enable us to move forward. It is about, were those values sufficient? Are they still sufficient now? If they are, what is wrong with still going with them? If they are not, what is wrong with jettisoning them? So it is at that point of questioning, critical questioning, that we can actually begin to exhume and excavate some good thing about the African past. Wiredu has talked so much about what he calls authoritarianism. You know, that practice in the African past of always always bowing to those who are elderly, thinking that the gray hair is a badge of wisdom. Whereas the fact that you have gray hair doesn't mean that you're a wise person, okay? But so an elderly person talks and people say, no, you cannot query what he has said. For we do that is authoritarianism, okay? So we can relate to that, okay? But if you look at some other value, value of humanism, of always considering the human to be very significant, values of eco-friendliness, of not just being indiscriminate in the way you treat the environment. There wasn't anything called sporting in the traditional African society of the king and all these people just going into the bush and shooting indiscriminately as birds and animals, bringing down the huge elephant because you just want the tusk. There was a concept of respect for the environment, because that is the environment that is sustaining you. Okay, so both of you are relating together, and so if attempt to superimpose that traditional value on our anthropomorphic world now, where everything in nature exists for us, and look at the consequence of ozone layer depletion, climate change, tsunamis all over the place, the polar ice melting, and so on. So you begin to see the relationship that, okay, this is the way we've been relating in the past. These are the values that have sustained us in the past. And how then do we now begin to move forward to bring those values or aspect of those values into what we do? Okay, so you are teaching civic studies, civic education. Why is it difficult to begin to talk of Omoluabi or of Ubuntu or all those other values within all those traditional society that are very, very relevant, that allows an individual to... The Yoruba will not consider somebody... So I have a son. Will not consider somebody my age an uncle. No. That person will be a father. Do you understand? So you begin to see that kinship relationship. That, so if I see this person as a daddy, not as an uncle, there's something distant in taking somebody who is like your daddy to be an uncle. It's not the same kind of relationship that you will have with him. But if I see that person as somebody who could have given birth to me, and therefore who is my daddy, or who is a father, all those one goes to, the very heart of what it means to belong to a clan, to belong to a group, and to be cared for by that group. You necessarily will not sleep with in your mother's hut. You go to maybe the third wife of your father and sleep in her own hut. You relate with her children. She becomes your mother. And I will not worry, where I am, because we are all within the same clan, within the same society.
So we're talking about what is the utmost fulfillment for the African. Is that perhaps the ultimate question? Like, what?
No, how can the African begin to relate with the world? Should we relate with the world on the world's own term, or should we relate with the world on our own term? Do you understand? Yeah. That is very critical. Because relating with the world now on its own term, we're going to continue to fail. Yeah. There's no way we can win. But if we now begin to call for a level playing ground, to say, okay, we're going to come to this, which is what China and all those other countries are doing, okay? That yes, capitalism is there, okay? But we're going to now begin to engage capitalism from the perspective of our own perspective, from the background of our own ideology, from where we are coming from.
So that's sort of my question.
Yeah.
And it sort of drives to the heart at the same time. Like, because when we think about the sort of basis of the foundation of the West, it sort of drives down to the individual. It's like the individual is like
an individualist ontology.
Yes, it's like the fulfillment of the individual is prime above all.
Yeah.
So are you then suggesting, I don't want to misquote you, are you then suggesting that perhaps the fulfillment of community is perhaps more critical for the African society?
Well, the fulfillment of the individual in society. So here we are talking of two different ontologies. The first one is an ontology that sees the individual as the most important, as prior to the society, as an atom that is not entangled by nationality, by culture, by ethnicity, by family, by nothing. You just stand alone. On the other hand, we have here who sees you, yes, as an individual, but as an individual that is entangled in some things that the individual did not choose by himself or herself. So I am an individual, but I have a family, I have a particular culture, I belong to a particular ethnic group, I am a male or a female. All those things, if I'm to use the communitarian term, they entangle me, okay? And there is no way I can dissociate myself from all those things without damaging my sense of myself, okay? Because that is how I came into the world. I did not just drop. I dropped within a context. And that context modifies who I am and the kind of self-realization that I'm going to achieve. So begin to relate to those ontologies given even the modern existence and modern things. So look at the West and all the kind of things developing within it, and look at Africa and all the kind of things developing within it. So if Africa is going to burst into modernity, how do we want to be modern? Modern in what sense? Can we begin to relate to modernity on the basis of an individualist ontology, or on the basis of the ontology of a community of individuals who relate with one another as equals, as individuals, people who have a focus of what this community should be about and how we should go about it, So there's a debate in African philosophy on whether the community is oppressive, subdues the individual, or whether you have individuals within those communities that were actually individuals relating with those communities, but not allowing themselves to be subject to the imperatives of those communities. And of course, we had individuals like that. Okay, so in that sense, you talk of moderate communitarianism. Okay, that yes, you have the imperative of the community, but you also have individuals who also had their own desires, who also have their own focus and direction, and who can stand against the individual, the community, who can stand against the society to say, yes, this is what we're going to do and we're going to do it. So I'm not making a point for the West and its ontology of individualism. I'm making a point for this is where we are coming from. Earlier on we talked about those convergence of values. So one of those values is that filial feeling, fellow feeling, looking at the other person, not just as a means to an end, but as an end in itself, and then relating to that person on that basis,
Professor, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time and a wonderful conversation, and I'm really glad I finally got to meet you,
Thank you.
And I know you, because this is just the beginning of
I hope so.
Of a long journey.
I hope so.
I really appreciate it.
I hope so. I'm very grateful. Thanks.
Absolutely.